All right, guys. Happy Friday. Today is Friday, November 20th, and you're watching, you're hanging out with my community manager, the community built by, for, and managed by community managers. As always, you can hang out with us at our Twitter chat at hashtag CMGR Hangout, where I know a bunch of you are right now. So, hey, what's up, guys? And if you like what you're seeing, or maybe you have an idea for a future topic, please head over to our website at www.mycmgr.com. There's a button that says participate. You can click on that, fill out the form, and that comes to Sherry, Dom, and I. It's really your ideas, and it's you that makes makes this show happen every Friday. So please feel free to give us your ideas. So, all right, what do we have for you today? Today's topic is online community policies, and let's think for a moment about how much more chaotic driving would be without the rules of the road. Online communities are really no different when it comes to creating and enforcing policies that set the stage for your community members. With that, I'm just going to roll right in and let people introduce themselves, starting with Patrick. Hey, Patrick, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing good. Thanks for having me. Are there rules to the road? I just got my driver's license renewed yesterday, and I couldn't recognize some of the signs. So anyway, my name is Patrick O'Keefe, and I write at managingcommunities.com. I've been managing online communities for 17 years, moderating for 15, and I've written a lot of community policies and written a lot about the topic and thought a lot about it. So it should be fun to talk about.
Hey guys, I'm Dom. Lower third list today, like a lot of us. I am a community manager for Be the Change Revolutions, as well as a co-host here with Sherry and Brew. And I am actually feeling super selfish. I don't know a ton about this topic, but I'm really excited to learn from people who do know a ton about this topic. So.
Hey everybody, I'm David Dewald, longtime community manager, written my fair share of rules. I actually have a generic list of rules that I'll share later out on Twitter that you guys can adapt and use as you need. I'm sure we all have a custom set that we could share.
Hey everyone, it's Brock. I am also lower third list today. Brock DC on Twitter. I have been managing different communities of different sizes, so I'm super excited. And currently I'm the community manager for Meshfire and a couple other projects, so I'm super excited to be talking to you guys about the guidelines and how we get to create them and adapt them and deal with our members. I'm actually stoked to hear from David and Patrick and Sarah, because I think that they have a ton to contribute that I'm going to be learning a lot from. So, yay, happy Friday.
Okay, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, and
Yes.
we can see a door. So your camera's
Yeah, it's
working.
the other way. Let me flip it around. I don't know what's going on with my camera. There.
Oh.
Is that moving? Oh, it is moving. All right. Hang on. All right. Can you guys see me now?
We can see you.
Huzzah!
All right. 'Cause I can't see you at all.
So yeah, why don't you go ahead and just introduce yourself?
Hey, I'm Sarah, the technologically challenged one. I am the author of Fierce Loyalty and love talking about all things community. So that's me.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us today. My name is Brew, director of Awesome at Be the Change Revolutions, co-producer here at MyCMGR, and rocking the lower third. So let's just jump into the very first question here, which is, what types of policies are essential for online communities? So who'd like to start us off?
Well, I'll jump in on that because I was following the brouhaha around South by Southwest, and I think having policy spelled out ahead of time on what's your online abuse policy is super important. You don't want to have to figure that out when you're in the middle of a firestorm of media attention. You want that laid out on the front end. What is your policy? What constitutes in your community? What constitutes online abuse, and what happens if someone raises their hand and says, "Yeah, it's happening"? What do you do? And I think it's really important to have all that stuff spelled out before something bad happens.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's kind of the way I approach online community guidelines is kind of think of like the worst case scenarios and how we would approach that, and then write the guidelines around how we want to handle it. So, and I mean, it kind of seems counterintuitive when you're creating a new community, but you kind of have to future-proof yourself and also leave it flexible. But it's things like posting policies and harassment policies and like expectations of moderators. When can people expect to hear from you, and the response time and things like that. It's very basic things that we intuitively know that we would have to remember to write out for our members because it's not intuitive for everybody.
Right.
Yeah, I think defining what is harassment is probably the best first start. What is considered harassment in your community?
Because there are always going to be trolls, and we all know that, right?
And there's going to be rules lawyers, too, who are going to find ways to pick your rules apart.
Because they have nothing else to do.
They do love to find the loopholes.
Yeah, they will look for the loopholes, and they will find them, and they will exploit them, and then you have to you'll get into this arms race where they'll do something, you'll create a rule, you'll do something, create a rule. But, it's if you have an expectation of, if you have like a rule that says, let's be cool here and not be, okay, my company literally has a rule that is called the no asshole rule.
Yep.
And, and that's part of the whole hiring process is they weed out the people that they think are going to be assholes. And I think that that's a good fit for a community. It's if you get into this arms race with somebody, you have the right to say, you know what, I don't want to play anymore. You're done. And
I think the bottom line policy is, at some point somebody gets to say you're out. I mean, don't get in. There is no arms race. I say you're done, and you're done.
So, as far as specific policies that are essential, they'll vary by community because most guidelines don't deal with legal concerns or ethical concerns, but more societal concerns or cultural norms in the community. So things like what goes where, can you post this more than once, profanity, advertising, things like that. So those will vary by community, but it's essential to have guidelines because they're sort of the foundation of a fair and even playing field in the community. If you ever want to have standards, if you ever want to apply standards, you can't apply from an imaginary rule set. You have to have something that's on the community that you can point to, that everyone can read. Whether or not they read it or not, at the start, it has to be there so that there can be that sense of fair play in the community when you are applying standards.
Yes.
I like that. Yeah, I was actually going to ask a little bit of a spin-off is more about how important is it like a moderation policy, just to be upfront, allowing or really telling people this is the type of stuff we're not going to allow, and hide, delete, whatever. Where do you start when you are creating the policies for your community? So like, what's step one?
Well, I would look at kind of two things. First, you know your audience.
Where'd everybody go?
I'm here. I think we just lost Patrick for a minute.
I'm sure Google, it was going to be an absolutely brilliant point too.
I know. Google, bring him back. Bring him back, Google.
That worked earlier.
I feel like we're asking Jarvis.
Yeah.
I
think it leans back, just to take up the dead air here. Leans back to what we just said, is that each community is different, and you should look at the community as it is today. And if you're allowing profanity, then you can't really disallow it because they'll revolt on you. But using the community as you have today is kind of the baseline, and say what are the behaviors we have today that we want to keep? What are the behaviors that we have today we'd like to weed out, and start going from there. Because generally when you first start a community, unless you really have planned ahead, you're going to have a core group of people there already working with you to kind of build it, and you'll have joined together and kind of made the rules up as you went along, and now you're kind of formalizing that process. And I'll let Patrick get back to his point.
Oh, is he back? Okay.
Was there a point made? I got cut off, I think, right at word one. Anyway, technical issues are fun. So I was going to say that, first of all, you have your audience, and I maybe covered this point, David, but the idea that you know who you want to pursue, you know who you are trying to pursue. So I think you write guidelines that meet that persona, you meet that kind of audience, because you have to cater to someone. If you don't cater to someone, you're not attractive to anyone. And the other thing is, there's a lot of other communities out there. There's more than a few. So I think you can look at all the other communities online that are popular, that are successful, and look at the things that they're applying their guidelines to. Are they the issues they face, and learn from that and think about whether or not those are issues you'll face. And guidelines aren't a static document. You can always change them. You can always update them. So start with some core issues you think you'll experience, and then as you see new ones, you can adjust those guidelines.
Yeah, I think guidelines are definitely a living, breathing document, and that's how one, you have to set the expectation of that's what it is. Like, the guidelines will evolve, and it is at the moderator's discretion of how they want to apply it and how they want to evolve the guidelines. Another thing I think is keeping in mind whether or not your community is going to be public or private, and the guidelines kind of vary for that if it's like a private group and if it's a public. And also thinking about your core audience and remembering their needs, and it might be people that are not. Sometimes you are creating communities for people who are not technologically savvy, so maybe thinking about those as you're creating the guidelines and being a little bit more specific versus kind of assuming that everybody will understand the references that you're making, and not being tone deaf to your audience, and keeping that in mind, I think, is also a good place to start as well.
And just to throw one other thing in here, and it's not necessarily the place you should start, but where I think you can also, what you really need to think of, and it's sort of like, David mentioned it a little bit when you have the loophole artists. When you're making these guidelines, almost think like a troll when you're going through all of it, as sort of like a litmus test for these guidelines that you're setting up. Because there are going to be those people, there are going to be the ones that are just going to abuse it. So if you sort of get a step ahead of them, and you sort of think like them for a second, how would they take that? How would they might, use it to, that'll definitely help when the, Brian says think like a fan. I say think like a troll. So just it's always good to sort of test those types of things. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Zay Frank released a video years ago where he talked about the idea of brain crack and getting addicted to the idea that my idea will be perfect. I'll get it out there and it'll be perfect. Everyone will be applauding and clapping for me. And the downside of that is you don't really ship any ideas. You don't actually get anything out there. So I do think it's important to eventually have to get those guidelines out there and write them in good faith. And as you identify new issues, adjust for them. But I don't personally worry too much about loopholes. We have a consistent standard and we apply it. It's pretty binary, right? It's yes, no, very simple, sort of standard in the middle, and I don't really see people as trolling even. It's inflammatory or not. This is either a disrespectful comment or it's not. So I don't even try to judge people who are trolling or not. I just take them at their remarks and then apply the guidelines to those remarks. So just get them out there and then adjust.
I think it's important to get some basics up just to create that predictability, because I think it's really important when people come to a community, especially if they're, when I'm working with people on communities, building or restructuring their communities, I always say, you have to assume that somebody's coming to your community for the first time every day. So they have no idea how it works or what's going on. And so to have some basics in place so that if it's a brand new person shows up, they can sort of see, what are the fundamental rules here? What's allowed, what's not allowed? What happens if this happens, or what happens if that happens? Just so that there's some idea of how your community functions for the brand new person.
So when we're creating these policies, what stakeholders would you consult when creating community policies? So who do we kind of bring aboard to make sure that they're bought in and contributing?
I know at least for my community and my company, we had a silo that was taking care of customer success in different ways and different forms. Not actually called customer success, but professional services, CSS, and support and community are kind of all rolled into one. And I know that the director, the higher level of that, was really concerned about protecting our customers from, for lack of a better word, protecting them from our sales department and from our marketing department. And that seems kind of weird to say, but we don't want them in the community marketing and being salesy, because that's not what the community is about and what it's for. And so, having that buy-in from a high level to be able to say, okay, marketing, it's fine if we do something small, something little, but we're not going to do something 24/7, 365 and just be annoying with it. So certainly, within a company, if it's a company kind of a thing, getting buy-in as far up the chain of command as you can. I'm really fortunate in that, when I got hired, I actually interviewed with the CEO. That was one of the steps in my process. And, getting to talk to him and getting his understanding of what he thought the community should be and where it should go, and feeling comfortable that, he has the right ideas and understands the power and potential and what we can and cannot do, was a big help. So, when I send out a report monthly, I will get questions back from him that are informed questions. Like, he'll ask, how does this compare to another existing community, or an average community? And that's a great thing to have. So, as high up the chain as you can, really, get everybody on board to say, we're trying to make this the best that we can for us and for our users. And what do you think that would look like?
I also think it's important to get some stakeholders from the community itself, and not just, it's really easy to pull, the really highly visible, super active participants, and get and create buy-in with them. But I think it's really important, if you can, to see if you can get some of the lurkers, so that you can figure out what's it gonna, what are the barriers? What are the barriers for people participating more in the community? And the lurkers can tell you that. So getting involvement and participation from people who actually use the community is important too.
Yeah, and I think depending on what kind of company you're with, if there is a product team, definitely touching base with them, and like the support teams, not just customer service and customer support, but also like actual product teams who are the people that you're going to be reaching out to if there is this product-specific question that comes in. Kind of setting expectations with the guidelines of, we used to, so when we set the guidelines for Google Small Business Community, we are not the product experts. It's not a product support forum, but we had in the guidelines that the moderators would do their best to get the answers, and sometimes that requires reaching out to a product team and getting an answer from them. So setting the timeline of whether or not it'll be 24 hours or 48 hours, definitely getting the buy-in from them, because they're the ones that you're going to be reaching out to, is also important.
How do you make sure your policy is simple and clear enough that it's going to be read? So I know certainly I've seen policies where it's like, it looks like about 12 different legal departments got involved.
So the first step is don't let legal get a hold of it.
You don't let legal get a hold of the document, or you'll never get anywhere. And you won't be able to do anything, ever.
And, in the U.S. at least, legal doesn't really have to be involved in the community guidelines. I mean, I'm not saying it would be a bad thing, but, we have Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, and basically it empowers us to moderate our communities how we see fit. And so, like, I've spent time talking with Eric Goldman, who's a professor of law at the Santa Clara University, an expert on internet law, and he says that, your terms of service, that's a legal document. That's something for an attorney. But your community guidelines, behavioral norms in the community, that's not a legal document. that's a separate thing. It's something that we are empowered to set on our own. And while someone can sue for you for anything, I can sue the mayor for the sky being blue. It's not. There's no case there because we can remove a post from our community for no reason if we want to. And not that obviously that's not fair, but so we can set our own policies and we can moderate our community. So it's not really it's not even really necessary. Just as far as being simple or clear enough, I'll say up front, I'm not really a fan of guidelines that are like don't be a jerk, because I find that there is a point where the simplicity is unhelpful, where you may as well not have a policy at all, because what a jerk might be is different to each person. So I think it's important that they be detailed enough to be helpful. And you can provide a Cliff Notes version, a short version if you want, a summary, but go in and detail some of those nuanced policies that require a little more reading to fully understand so that you can refer to them if you need to do so.
I like that idea. I think you can post like really simple, here's the basics of our policies, but click here for the more in-depth version so that you've always got the detail to fall back on if you need it.
Yeah, and I'm a huge fan of bullet points, so I mean that speaks to more of like the formatting than the actual words. But like basically, when people are glancing at the document, they should be able to see like with the headers and the bullet points of like the actual points that you want to get across, and then the details of like defining what is a jerk and what's like bad behavior and what's not acceptable. But definitely breaking that up so it doesn't read like a terms and conditions agreement is super helpful, I think, from a visual perspective.
Dom, we got a question from Twitter. You fall asleep?
No, I got it.
Okay.
I'm just trying
I can't see the screen, so if I get any questions, you have to tell me.
Oh yeah, we'll read it off.
Okay. So here's a question from Adam. What's up, Adam? How many people have communities where policy violations have real-life consequences as well? So not just like oh bummer you can't be on the forums, but like some real-life consequences. Have you guys
like
dealt with
banning
that
them
before?
from the product type thing?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, like something more
altogether.
than just like a slap on the wrist type of a consequence. Like, have you guys dealt with anything serious like that?
David?
I know the gaming communities as a whole will have that rule. They'll kick you off the system or whatever game you're playing. But I know that as I said in the B2B world and the B2C world, typically people's jobs are on the line. If they screw up in your forum, then that could actually cost them their job. So they tend to be significantly more polite and nice and accommodating. But yeah, I know for a fact in the gaming world that I have personally had people that have spent thousands of dollars on an account and like gleefully at times closed it on them for just being bad actors.
I mean, it's not uncommon for there to be a separation, right, between being a part of the community and being able to use the product. Like, you might ban someone from the community, but they can still pay and be a part of the product. Or if you have a game, they could just be banned from the chat feature, but they can still give you money to play the game. Like, if they would still want to buy a piece of candy and Candy Crush, they'll happily take their money maybe, but you can separate those two things out.
And they do that. I mean,
what that also made me think about was, real life consequences in that, there are people who get in communities and they think they can say anything they want to anyone in any way they want, and that has real life consequences on both the person who says it and the person who has to hear it. And I've been involved in communities like that. I've been in charge of communities where things like that have happened, and it's just a no. It is for me, it's an instant. You're done. Because it does have real life consequences.
I think I've reported somewhere to their employer before when they were using the employer resources to post like a series of comments over years, and then it stopped, surprisingly. And then there was another case where someone was banned from a community that I managed, and they came back and came back and came back and spammed the private messages. So eventually I just put together a packet and reported them to their ISP, and I heard from them indirectly about a week or two later that they had been suspended from their ISP for like a month, and they weren't too happy about it. But I never heard from them again, so you know it was worth it.
Awesome. We have another question here from Katie. And by the way, guys, if you do have any questions, just feel free to tweet them. You know, use CMGR Hangout, the hashtag, and go ahead and tag my CMGR. Carrie and Kristen are actually having a question war to see who can grab it and send it in our little chat the fastest. So fire away some questions to give them plenty of ammo. But Katie asks, what stakeholders should be involved in making community policies? Someone from CS, definitely. Do you guys have any others? I know we kind of hit that one, but can you guys think of anybody else that maybe we didn't mention?
I think Katie was just making
support is good.
Adding in CS.
Customer support's good. Customer support's good if you have a customer success org, if you have professional services, if you have training, because they're going to want to handle that kind of information, right? Anybody that has a stake in the community, you know, you can let them have a voice, but ultimately you've got to decide, because they're all going to have different versions of what they want, but some of those just might not be conducive to a good community. So
yeah, you don't want to start trying to please everybody, because then it just becomes a night. You can't, and your community will fall apart.
I mean, realistically, I think we want community to permeate throughout an organization. So, if that means just sitting down for coffee with someone and saying like, what can community do for you, and what, you know, first and foremost, and delivering on that, and then getting value from them for the community, I think that's, you know, always a good first start.
Right. I think for policies, I think getting buy-in across the organization is critical, and I agree with you. It's just when you start trying to get everybody's fingers in the policy pie, it can get really murky really quickly.
So now that we have these policies in place, how do we encourage our community to read the policies and be aware of them?
We actually build it into our engagement. So if there's somebody, so part of our moderation policy is that we greet everyone who comes in, and we make sure that they, you know, get a comment to their intro post, and we encourage them, like we direct them to the community guidelines. If something comes up, we'll direct them. We'll sometimes we have been growing like exponentially, and what we'll do is we'll do kind of like a reminder post once in a while, and it's in a we also created a new to the community doc, which is not just the guidelines. It has everything from how to post, what the categories are, and then it also has like the guidelines and the moderator information and everything like that. So I think it's the best way to do it, the most natural way to do it, is to build it into your engagement policy and your commenting policy, and bring it up whenever it's naturally, like, it's not forced. And that's aside from having it in the about and making sure that people are, you know, being directed to it and it's easy to access. I think that's the best way to do it.
I like that. I really like that.
Yeah, I think well, go ahead, Pete.
Just to add on to that, you know, I think a lot of the time when people are first actually looking at the guidelines, like not scanning them or seeing a link to them, they're actually they violated them, right? So I think it's important to look at guideline violations as an educational opportunity more than anything else. You know, I don't tell people that what they did was wrong necessarily, as much as this is a guideline violation and this is how to avoid it in the future. So linking people to those guidelines in that case, that's really the first moment. A lot of people are exposed to your guidelines, even if you include it in every process and the welcome emails, and you tell them to check it out and you beg them to read them. You know, a lot of people will just skip over them until it affects them. So I never look at guideline violations as being adversarial, just an opportunity to say, hey, this is something that we don't really encourage here, and here's the guidelines for the future. And I find that helps educate people as much as any other effort, really.
Yeah, that's he took the words out of my mouth. So it's you know, go after them, not go after them, that's not the right phrasing, but simply let them know the rules at that point. You know, when they've broken the rules, you can say, hey, like, you messed up here, but it's no big deal, we can move forward.
Keep feeding me those points in chat, David, and I'll keep taking them.
If only that were the case, you know. You've got a couple years more experience on me. I mean, 15 versus 17, 2 years matters, man.
We were joking around in the little side chat too. It's like not often does David normally steals other people's points that they're thinking they're like, oh, David's already got it. Now that Patrick's here, this is like this is nice. We're gonna have a battle.
We're crowdsourcing David's points. Please use the hashtag. You can DM me if you want. I'm always available.
It's funny. It's just that it's not that I'm smarter than anybody else. It's just that I've had a lot longer time to run into these problems. It's like everybody. It'll happen to you. One day you'll wake up and you'll be like, "Oh yeah, now I've had to deal with that. I know how to solve that problem."
Yeah, self-deprecation is nice, but you're a smart guy.
I stand on the shoulder of giants. That's all it is.
It's good. So if you're playing the David DeWall drinking game, you've got that one. Go ahead and drink. Another question we've got coming in here. How do we make it easy for community members to locate the community guidelines? So, obviously we want them to, we encourage them to read them, but how can we make it easy to find?
I would say splash them around wherever, you realistically can. So visible pointers, header, footer, in the signature of staff members, whenever you contact them. Sorry, go ahead.
Be somewhere.
I'm sorry, say again?
It was like make them sticky, like if you have a forum set up, you make them sticky across the top.
Right.
Yeah, I think, most community platforms generate tons of emails, whether we expect it to or not. And those emails are typically modifiable, so you can always have that link in every message they get from your community, even if it's small and out of the way, just community policies.
I've linked to the guidelines next to the posting box, by posting you read these guidelines. I have a link at the top of threads where people can report things that that violate the guidelines, and of course the guidelines are linked. So really, wherever you want to signpost it, visible areas of the community, I find that helps a lot. Of course, in many cases people won't read them anyway, so you go back to that first violation to educate.
All right, we got one more actually that is a little bit more in the nitty-gritty, so I'm interested to hear what you guys have to say to this. Jim, how's it going, Jim? He said that he needs a business-friendly community policy which clearly defines spam versus acceptable self-promotion, etc. And I know that's a fine line. What have you guys really run across with this in writing guidelines?
That's tough, isn't it, right? So what's acceptable self-promotion versus spam? I think that I always use the compare-contrast kind of test, right? If you come into my community and say, this product, you should buy this product, I'm going to call that spam. But if you come in and say, you should buy this product and here's why you should buy this product and how it compares to our product or how it compares to other products, I'm less inclined to treat that as spam. Spam tends to be, here's an amazing product, go buy it now. And, if you have some more introspectiveness to it, like here's a great product, it's really good at doing this, it's really good at doing this, maybe not so good at doing this, I'm more inclined to leave it because that seems to be more to the point. So, if a user comes in and says, I offer these services or I can help you with this, that's one thing, and that's probably softer than they can say, you should come to my website because I can help you do what you need to do. That seems spammy to me. So it's a hard litmus test to figure out what is what. I always use a gut check. Does this seem spammy to me? Yes or no? And go from there.
Also, frequency, I think, can influence whether it's perceived as spammy or not. And I know I've seen many communities where there's a frequency, there's a guideline for how frequently you can post what you offer, and I think that helps.
It feels like the person who asked this question really wants to allow a form of self-promotion in the community. So what I would say to that is you probably have a picture of what you want. I would take a stab at defining that. Is it that it exists in a certain section? Is it a certain phrasing? Is it a certain frequency? I would go ahead and define that yourself for what you want to accomplish, because really you look at 100 communities, you'll find I don't know if 100 different advertising guidelines, but maybe 50, maybe 20. Like the things that Sarah and David mentioned here, neither of which would probably be acceptable in the communities I manage. And there's nothing right or wrong with that. It's just that each community is like its own country. We're all different. We all manage differently. So it feels like you want to allow self-promotion, and you probably have an idea of what that is. So I would go out there and just try to take a stab at defining that and see how it works.
Yeah, and part of the things that we say is we encourage people, so if you're posting something, be helpful and be specific and constructive. So those are kind of like the guidelines of if you are, or if you're like soliciting feedback, or if you are posting about a product, why are you posting in this community? Why should people care about it? And we encourage people to say that. So even if so it's in the guidelines, and like it goes back to your comment about it's usually the violation that gets the people looking at the guidelines. We also have form responses about spam, why we remove it, and then we encourage people like, here's how you might want to try phrasing it, because like we see your point, but this is why it's spam versus a useful promotional link that will actually bring benefit and information that'll be beneficial to our other community members. So I think taking it with that perspective, and also creating those form responses for when there is spam that comes through, having that internal communication ready, so that it's not just, you're not just removing it, but here's why you removed it, and you want people to come back and post, unless it's just straight up spammers, which we all know. But because sometimes people have a hard time phrasing it, that goes also back to people who might not be very be very good at the web, or the way they phrase things, or not sure how, like, what qualifies as spam. So define those as helpful as possible, and then give that feedback that's constructive to them as well.
And I would just add that I think it's, when you think about allowing self-promotion, think about the work you're making for yourself. So just make sure it counts, because if you have to define a line of self-promotion of what is ad and what isn't an ad, then you're creating extra work for yourself and your moderator. So it really should be intrinsic to your community and necessary. Otherwise, it's easier to have cleaner lines that you can simply apply to everyone than say, okay, this is an ad, this isn't. So again, necessary, great use of your time. Your community isn't about business or something where people need to promote. Like if it's about the martial arts or sports, you really don't need to get into self-promotion necessarily.
I do want to dig in. Patrick mentioned it briefly, of giving it maybe a silo of its own. Maybe that's what you do, is you carve out a place in your community where this is the only spot you can self-promote in any way, shape, or form you want to, and then just take the steps within your community to limit the impact that can have on the rest of the community. So notifications and stuff like that come out of that won't be visible in other parts of the community. That gives your users the choice, right? They can choose to go into this place and see all of this self-promotion or not. And if they don't, then it never impacts their daily use of the community.
I've seen that work really, really well, because then it creates really clear lines and makes it really simple for people who do want to self-promote, and then the people who don't want to see that stuff.
So getting back to some of our to our list of questions. Number 6 is, how do you enable your team to enforce community policies? So assuming that you have a team and you're not doing this all yourself, is it just a matter of, hey, go read it on your own, or do you got to take them through it, or how does that work?
I think with team members, it's really important to empower them. So that they don't feel like they have to come running to you every time there might or might not be some sort of policy violation. But I also think it's important to spot check them from time to time, just to make sure that what they're doing is actually reflective of what the community needs.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. There are a few things that I do. Spot checking is part of it, and I'll get to that in just a second. So number 1 is just I have something I call a situations guide. So basically, it's like, here are situations that we commonly face as a moderator, and here's what we do. Or here's how we define the line for profanity. Or here's like advertising that's acceptable versus not. Depending on your community, like you'll have nuanced situations of the application of your guidelines where it's not as simple as cross-posting, which like they posted it twice, I can remove it. So this document kind of explains the nuances of situations that they'll face and really helps people get up to speed quickly when they're new to the team. We also have a system of documentation. Everything that is ever done in regard to a user on the community is always documented for all staff members to see. So this violation, what occurred, what we did about it, anything that resulted from it. Everyone sees this, and it's this amazing educational resource, and part of that is that spot checking, because I'm always checking the documentation. Every time I come to the community, the documentation gets checked. It's usually a quick thing. It doesn't take much time, but if there is a problem, I always correct it. Brock mentioned form messages. I'm pretty sure that's what I call Connect templates. These form messages that you have where they match a certain violation. Here's the message you send to people who are advertising. Here's the one you send to people who posted a disrespectful comment. Here's the one for profanity, etc. Pre-written messages where everyone can be on the same level tone-wise and educating the members about the guidelines. And finally, just constant communication between myself and the staff, always talking, always going over various situations that occur. That always helps as well, because I never want to create an environment where a mistake is fatal. Mistakes aren't a big deal as long as they aren't repeated and we correct them. And so you don't want to create a circumstance where people are afraid to admit they were wrong. So constant communication. And I'm sorry for going so long.
No problem. That was good.
And I think even with like moderators and the people that are helping you, it's okay to go back to them and explain why you may have reversed an action that they took. If it's one of those things where they took action and in hindsight you kind of review what they've done and you decide that it's not maybe as bad as they thought it was or an infraction, but covering it with them and saying, look, like Patrick say, we make mistakes, we just move on and learn. And I think that's acceptable too. But definitely, I think that someone earlier this week tweeted that having volunteer moderators is just making it easy for them to turn on you and stab you in the back. And I think that with proper vetting and proper training and proper oversight, that would never in a million years happen. You might get one or two that go rogue every once in a while, but if you clear out the house quick and make it publicly known that you did not agree with this person is no longer with us, and nobody, then it not only shows the other moderators that you're willing to stand your ground, but it also shows the community that you're not going to let moderators abuse their power.
I was getting ready to go at you over that volunteer comment, because then you said that volunteers are good, because I've managed hundreds of volunteers over the years and have had so many wonderful people and built such a great sense of loyalty between those people. It's hard, that type of thing does happen, but it's pretty rare if you're careful about selection, and the recruitment part is kind of the key part of the whole process.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there was times when I was one community manager at a big company with millions of users, and if I had not had those 200 odd volunteers helping me, I would have just been so overwhelmed, burnt out, and it would have been impossible for me to keep up with it all. 14 different communities to look at in a single day with thousands of posts per day. There's no way I could have managed it on my own without an awesome team of moderators and volunteers. Some of those today have gone on to be community managers based on their experience with me and doing that kind of thing, which I'm very proud of. So definitely vetting and making sure that they're well trained and that you always have a line of communication open to them, and they'll never turn on you. In fact, they may be far more loyal than you ever imagined, because they get what you're trying to do.
Question number 7 is, what's one of your favorite examples of online community policies? So we're assuming you guys love policies. And what's your favorite? Can you choose just one?
I guess I'll say something. So I had thought about this in reading the question, and there's a lot of good guidelines out there. Like, the people who manage communities, on the whole, tend to at least understand their community in a reasonable way. So there's a lot of decent guidelines out there, and I was trying to find something outside the norm, outside of my friend network of community professionals, and I came across the community guidelines at Glassdoor, and I thought they were pretty good. I thought they were simple and yet detailed enough to be helpful and reasonable, and they apply to the different types of content that they host on their website. So I thought they were pretty good guidelines. You can just Google the Glassdoor community guidelines. Just came across it randomly and thought it was a reasonable example.
Sarah, you have a favorite policy?
I don't, because I'm laughing because policies are the most difficult thing for me because I don't like to adhere to policies too much. I'm sort of an anarchist that way, but I also know that they're really, I mean, they're super important. And in what I do, I think when I start thinking about what's the most important policy that I work on with my clients and stuff, I think the one that is the most important is the one that helps it. We've all been talking about it. Each community is unique, and I think it's really important to convey that to community members, because I think a lot of community members will come into a community carrying what they believe the policies and guidelines should be from whatever other communities they belong to. And I think it's important to set the tone that this community is unique and different, and so the policies and guidelines that we have will be reflective of this particular community. And I think it's also important to articulate how much input community members have in the guidelines, how that input is funneled, because a lot of community members will also come in thinking that they should have a lot of say in what the guidelines should be, and then it's important to convey to them whether they do or don't. I mean, not in those kinds of terms, but do they or don't they have an avenue to have input into the guidelines, because that sets a really high-level tone for how the guidelines will then roll out.
How about you, Barack? David?
I think for me, just with policies in general, that at some point someone's going to pop up and say, what about my free speech? And I think it's important that you express that, you're not stopping their free speech. You're just preventing them from posting something on your forum. And that, I have a line in my generic rules that I tweeted out. The very last sentence on that page says, what about my freedom of speech, in quotes. And, we're not stopping you from starting your own forums out there where you can set your own rules, say what you want, when you want, wherever you want. But here, these are the rules, and this is what you got to follow. And we'll enforce them. I think that alone says a lot, right? And a lot of times, I've actually said, people have come to the community and say, I hate the way this community is run. And I said, here, I'll tell you what, I will help you set up a community for yourself. And I will let you try it, and I will help you find the right platform. I will help you get it started. I will help you seed it. And then you can see just how hard managing a community can be and why we set these basic ground rules just to keep you in line. Because people outside just sometimes don't get it. They don't understand the impact that they're having until they have to live through it. And so for me, that's kind of, I'm all about freedom of speech, but here I have to set some rules just so that we can get along and we can be productive and we can enjoy the community.
So am I the only one that's going to mention a specific example of community guidelines then? Answer question 7. Anyone want to mention one? Everyone's going to be off topic on this one.
I pimped the generic rules of conduct I floated out there. Admittedly, it was a little self-serving.
Your favorite is your own?
Absolutely.
I mean, I've written some guidelines too, but I didn't pick it as my favorite.
Why not, Patrick? Why
I'm
not?
just giving you a hard time.
That's fine. Absolutely. I think
Shots fired, David. Shots fired.
It's 15 years. Well, I would tell you the generic rules of conduct that is out there was built specifically for gaming communities that can be a lot more hostile than business communities and corporate communities. Yeah. So it covers everything from what it actually clearly defines what is hate speech, right? There's a whole section on just hate abuse and harassment, because in those kinds of public communities you need it. But in a corporate community, that whole section could just be tossed to the wind because people are going to be on their best behaviors because, like I said, their job's on the line. So just adapt. Every community is different. The rule set's going to be different. Your favorite today will not be your favorite tomorrow because it won't fit.
Hey, Sarah, just so you know, I muted you for a second as you were talking. And I know you have your thing backwards, so you probably didn't see us mute you, but we were just getting some echo. So just sort of raise your hand if you want to talk, and I'll unmute you for you. Oh, okay, here, I'll unmute you right now. There you go.
Are you still getting echo?
Well, we're good now, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Did you have a favorite, or did you want to add to that favorites list at all?
No. Mm-mm.
Okay. Okay. So last we have about 8 minutes here. Well, really more like 5. The last question is anything else. So basically, anything that we didn't cover today that you think would be important to still mention.
I think that
one thing that. Oh, go ahead.
be very cognizant that you're not going to be able to write rules for every single thing that people come up with to do in your community, and that you need to kind of have that no asshole policy. And there's something that says, at some point we're just going to draw the line and say you're not welcome here anymore, because like I said, you don't want to get into an arms race where they do something or somebody does something, you make a rule, somebody else does something, you make another rule, and then suddenly the rules list is so long and so fine that now it's impossible to manage.
The one thing that I was going to say is, like when you're doing all of this, just remember that at no point are you ever like by yourself in making these. There's a billion communities out there, and everybody's gone through something probably similar to what your community is going through. And there's a lot of lessons to be learned from other people's communities and other people's mistakes. So find those people and seek them as counsel too, even though they might not be right in your community. Find them and talk to them and find those resources, because it'll definitely help when you're doing it, so it doesn't seem as daunting.
Yeah, and I think one thing to remember, and we kind of touched on this, but remember to empower your members, like especially the advocates, and remember to keep your rules, like your guidelines, fluid enough that if you do need to incorporate something based on feedback from the community, if it makes sense, incorporate that. And definitely just remember that it's not super rigid, and it's just something that everybody's learning as they go along. And like Dom mentioned, there are a ton of resources out there. So don't be afraid to ask questions to other community managers, to your members, to ones that you're trusted, like if you have like a trusted group of members that you get feedback on. And also, always just tweet at Community Manager Hangout. I think that we have enough people to help you guys out even when we're not doing a hangout on the air about it.
I think that, am I muted or can you hear me?
Can you
hear me? Just checking. I think what I would say is don't be afraid of establishing really clear policies. Often when I'm working with community managers or organizations, they're afraid that they're to write their policies so that they've got sharp edges because they don't want to offend anybody. And I'm like, well, that defeats a policy has got to be clear. So don't be afraid of policies and establishing policies. And like everyone else has said, reach out and see what other people have and how they've phrased them and worded them, so that you feel you can put together policies that you feel comfortable with, but that are crystal clear to your community members.
Beyond just being guidelines and a document for moderation, there are 2 ways to look at the community guidelines. First, again, it's a living document, not set in stone. It gets adjusted whenever you have a challenge that you feel needs to be codified in the guidelines. Don't hesitate to adjust it, announce the changes, be forthright and open about those changes. Oftentimes the changes will come from the members themselves, ideas they have or things they see. So it's definitely a living document. Number 2, it's sort of a vision statement for who you want to be as a community, the type of people you want to attract. So always write it with that in mind and with the best of your community in mind.
Awesome. Well, I think that brings us to the end here. A couple announcements. Number 1, wanted to give a happy birthday shout out a day early to Patrick. So happy birthday, buddy.
Thank you, sir.
And then the second, I'd love to give Sarah the floor for a second to just talk about your upcoming event.
Oh, yes. I have a workshop. If you're in or near Washington, D.C., I have a workshop this coming Tuesday. It's a half-day workshop. I'm actually already here because I'm here on business, and I just decided that I'd do a really inexpensive, small public workshop while I was here. So you can go to Fierce Loyalty and read about that, or you can email me, sarah@fierce-loyalty.com, and I can send you the link for it. Or tweet me. That's what you should do. Just tweet me.
And what's your Twitter, Sarah? So that everybody knows.
Sarah Robinson.
There we go.
Sarah with an H, Robinson.
Sarah with an H. Awesome. All right, guys. Well, thanks a lot. I definitely learned a lot today, and I'm sure this write-up will be fantastic. Lots of great nuggets for people to learn from. So, with that, have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.